Yes.
This is Bill Gustin from Miami-Dade, Florida, Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, along with Captain Mike Dugan, retired from Ladder 123 from the FDNY. Captain Jimmy Davis from Engine Fighting 43 on the Chicago Fire Department. Clark Lamping, who I do not see on the screen, but he's there somewhere, from the Clark County, Las Vegas area fire department. Bobby Halton, editor-in-chief and former battalion chief of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And our special guest today is Joe Barry, retired from the FDNY. I've been a fan and a student of yours for a long time. Before we begin, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Key Hose. That's keyhose.com. Don't go cheap on hose. It's your lifeline. If you want to put hose to the test, do what we do. Put it in the hands of recruits. Right now, as I speak, it's being dragged across the pavement. Now, I don't see Jason Hobelman, Chief Jason Hobelman. For some reason, my field of screen, I only see you guys. I see Jimmy, I see Joe, I see Bobby. Hold on a minute.
Go to your little view up in the corner, Billy. There's a thing that says view. There's a
All right, let me see here.
Oh
yeah, view. Okay, hold on.
Click on that, bro.
Gallery, full screen.
Gallery.
All right. Now I see everybody. Okay, Clark. All right, we got Clark. And are you laughing at my lack of computer literacy again? Yeah, I know you are. Yeah. You like to kick an old man when he's down. Okay. And Chief Jason Hobelman, who's soon to be visiting from the Florissant Valley Fire Department, Fire Protection District in Missouri, soon to be visiting the Emerald Isle. So our special guest, as I said, is Joe Barry. Joe, if you could tell a little bit about yourself, and then you wanted to examine some fires that is consistent with today's topic, which is fires that originate outside of a structure and then spread up the exterior and into the interior. Joe, you got as much time as you want.
Okay, I'm Joseph Barry, retired 31 plus years in New York City Fire Department. I spent 12 years in Midtown Manhattan, Ladder 24 in Engine 1. Got promoted in 83 and went to the South Bronx. I spent 5 years in Engine 7-3. And then the remaining years were in Ladder 42, a total of 31 plus years. It's been a great learning experience for me. And I find that by going to different places, you'll learn from everybody. You learn from the fireman, you learn from the probie, you learn from the chief. And it's a big learning experience. Compound that with going to fires. There's no such thing as a routine fire. When somebody mentions that to me, I can't take that statement sitting down, because what looks routine turns out to be a disaster, and it happens all the time. But anyway, my level of experience, I attribute from learning from so many different people. And I'm blessed that I had this opportunity to be in the fire department during that era. When I left the fire department, I went to work for Homeland Security. I worked from around 2003 to just about 2009. And I did that strictly after 9/11, because I felt that meant a lot to me, to go around the country and talk about terrorism and talk about, what we could do to prevent about it. So that was an experience too that I enjoyed. And then from 2009, I just started doing my hobby, which is writing. I wrote on many different topics over the years. What I like to write about is something that nobody ventured into. Not that I have a premonition, but I look at something and I go, that's going to be a problem for us down the road. And then I do research. Now, there's nothing out there to get research until you get fires. So what you do is you start chasing fires all around and you start learning. I started writing about self-storage facilities back to about 10 years ago. And the same thing with them, a lot of fires. Why they're happening, the problems associated with them. I wrote about dollar stores. I found that dollar stores were a hazard to firefighters. Why? My granddaughter loved going to a dollar store, and I picked up some trinkets. I went home and I tested them in the backyard, and I couldn't drop them fast enough. That's how fast they ignited. So I learned a lot myself by just going about and chasing leads down. You feel like Scoop Jackson from the Chronicles sometimes, but I do it for one motivation. My motivation is the safety of firefighters. And we sometimes try to be proactive, but it's very difficult, especially in the construction trade today. That's another one of my pet peeves. I wrote a lot about construction. I built my own house over the years. I was in construction back in the 70s when I got laid off. So I love construction. So I wrote articles about construction. Today, the fire service is faced with some serious issues. Years ago, when you went into a structure, you never worried about collapse. Now, the clock is ticking. Once that fire gets into the structure of new construction, your time is limited. You got to get people out. You're not saving property anymore. So it's just a fair synopsis of things that take my interest into play.
Well, you've got some scenarios, I understand, of some interesting fires that are classic, Joe, from originated on the outside and spread up the exterior, the combustible exterior.
Yeah, I asked Pete. I sent Pete some pictures. He has them if you could post them.
Can you put those up for us, Pete?
And by just a second, Joe, which one did you want first?
Let's start out with that new construction, the picture of the house, 2003. I wrote the article, but I didn't want to mention that because it's your competitor. So
That's all right.
no, the other one, that's the Syracuse fire.
Okay, stand by. Let me try and get through this thing.
You can mention the competitor, Jimmy. They need all the publicity they can get.
That's the Borderland fire. Nope, the next one down. Next one.
One more.
That's there. Now, this picture here, this is the house I mentioned about that the husband heard a bang, looked out the front of the home. The whole front of the house was fully engulfed. This is when I started looking into these outside-in fires. Now, go to the next slide, Pete.
Bear with me, Joe. This one?
No,
The other way?
The other way,
not that
Pete.
one. Related to this picture here, it shows a house across the street, 150, that one. This house is 150 feet. I measured it across the street from the fire building. We all know that radiation travels in a straight line. Well, you look at the mass of this house of the melted siding, 150 feet away. It gives you an idea how much radiant heat was being distributed from that house that was fully engulfed. When the engine company turned the corner, this homeowner was out with his garden hose and he's screaming at the engine because they wouldn't take the hydrant in front of his house. The reason he couldn't take the hydrant because the rig was burning. So he pulled down the block. But anyway, the whole front of the house was gone. All the sheathing was gone off the house. This house collapsed in 6 minutes. These people were so lucky to get out. The cause of this fire was interesting. They had a mulch bed all around the front underneath the deck. The day before, gardeners came and they were rejuvenating the mulch deck. And the only thing they summarized is it was electric mulch. It was electric walk lighting that was used in 110. They summarized that's where the ignition of the fire started in the mulch bed. So a common occurrence with these homes today, mulch beds, cigarettes. I mean, the one in Carmel, New York that Bobby was mentioning last week, same thing. Anyway, you can go to the next slide.
All right, bear with me, Joe. So let me know. This one here?
Sure. Yep. This fire was in Syracuse, New York. 6 lives lost, 4 children, 2 adults. If you notice the front of the house, the front porch collapsed. Like mentioned before, these porches are held up on older homes by a cylindrical column that's hollow in the inside. Now, I lived in the Queen Anne in Brooklyn, so we had the stereotype of the same type of home, much bigger home, of course. So I never realized it, but that column is even though it's cylindrical, that's holding up the axial load of that front porch. Well, the fire started in the front porch. They summarized from cigarette material, okay? A woman was outside smoking. It had a polyurethane sofa on the porch, 2 rugs, a stuffed chair, and some other various furniture. So the fire loading on that porch was equivalent to what you would find inside the house. The fire started on the front porch. There's the next shot to show you how much fire was on arrival. You can go to the next slide, Pete. That's fully engulfed when they pulled up, okay? So it's already in the house already. Anyway, that porch collapsed. They couldn't get in the house. The woman left the front door open and she wanted to go upstairs, but she couldn't. So she ran out the back and left the back door open. We all know from experience, fire, heat, and convection, they need a path. We always capitalize on closing the door. Well, it's a perfect example, leaving that door open. It traveled right through the house like a locomotive. It took the lives of 6 people. Next slide, please, Pete. This is an interesting fire. This is the front of the house. This is a Victorian, over 200 years old. If you look at the top dormer, the center dormer up on top, on arrival, 11 o'clock, this would be Mother's Day, 2007. Warm day during the day. This is a borderland farm. It's a horse farm. People who lived there, they were the caretakers that took care of the farm. The owner lived on the first floor. She was an elderly woman. What happened was a fire started in the rear. There was wood pile against the building. They summarized also smoking material. Well, somebody seen the fire in the incipient stage earlier in the evening and they poured beer on it to put it out. Unfortunately, it didn't go out. 11 o'clock at night, this thing is rip roaring in the rear. Anyway, when the fire department pulled up, the husband and 16-year-old daughter are breached out on that dormer, out on the ledge. Heavy smoke is pushing out of all 3 dormers. They took a portable ladder off the engine, first 2 engine, put it up to the left side of the right side of the porch, went up to the roof, put a second ladder up, just about barely reached the underhang. Fireman climbed the ladder, used his body as a bridge to help the daughter, 16-year-old, and the father down to the roof level. When they got down to the roof level, the fire already started venting out the front door and the front window. They had a line stretched. They used that line to hold back the fire till they can get everybody down to ground level. Phenomenal rescue. 3 firemen initially, volunteer fire department. Could you go to the next slide on that, Pete, please? That's the back of the building on arrival. Okay. It got in on every floor. What I mentioned before about construction, why construction is so important to the fire service, because if you have an idea of the construction, you could predict the outcome of what's going to happen based upon the fire condition on arrival. This is an open interior stair Victorian. As with a lot of these McMansions today, they want that grand open interior hallway that goes up to the bedroom area from the foyer. Well, once fire comes in, it has that perfect path to extend upward. This came in on every floor. And it's such a tragedy that happened. It could have been prevented. Then again, it's smoking material. I found the majority of fires that I looked into, the #1 cause is related to smoking material. And in my opinion, I think it's going to get worse. With the legalization of marijuana, and I'm not an advocate on anything bad or good, but today you added a new flux into smoking. And I don't have to say any more about it. Anyway, those are the 3 fires I wanted to mention. There are 3 different type of buildings. Okay, one is an old Victorian, very prevalent throughout the country, United States, 200 years old, 150 years old. McMansions, they're all over the place built today. And then, of course, that house that's built in the 1920s and 30s, very prevalent all around America today. I picked those out because of the era. Getting back with construction, we talk about the lightweight construction. Well, today, everything is built with truss floors and truss roofs. What I find today is, from my own personal experience, once that fire gets in that void area and it's pressurizing, it's a labor-intense operation. You're not going to put it out unless you have sufficient manpower, and most importantly, you could vent that roof. If you can't vent that roof, it's all over. And with the lightweight construction today, it doesn't take much for these trusses to fail. These trusses will fail normally just with the plate from humidity and heat, from expansion and contraction, never mind fire in that truss loft area. I find today a lot of people use that attic for storage. You got a heavy fire loading in that attic. So this type of construction today, get the life hazard out. The building's going to collapse in a short period of time. Get everybody out. The other thing I found interesting about the building trade today, years ago, buildings were made with Douglas fir, a very dense fence lumber. If you look at the building on Borderland Farms, there was charring in these beams, but the building was pretty much, a lot of it was still salvageable. They knocked it down, they raised it. You look at that other fire that happened in Syracuse, a lot of the beams were still in place. Today, they use what they call loblolly pine. It's a young growth pine. You pick up a piece of spruce today and a piece of Douglas fir, you can feel the density as far as the weight. So that's what you're dealing with today in the construction state. You're dealing with a lumber today that is going to be consumed very, very rapidly. That's just the point I wanted to bring forth. And then, of course, the void area. Once that fire gets in the void area, and you have voids in the floors today, multiple story apartment buildings are being built all around the country today. They're all wood frame buildings with truss floors, truss roofs. That's a project I've been working on for the last 2 years, chasing fires on them and how they're going to react. I know how they're going to react. The building's gone. The scary part about those buildings, if a fire occurs in the middle of the evening, or the middle of the morning, you have the potential for a lot of loss of life. Case closed. So anyway, that's just a fast synopsis of these buildings I'm referring to. What I put down, I have tons of them. If you want more, I could go on and go on and go on. Another interesting story. There's a nursing home, Coney Island, 2001. And I got this picture from Chief Goldblatt, and it's unbelievable. What the building was, a fireproof building, but they put EFIS, we all know what EFIS is, on the exterior of the building. And what happened was they stored the dumpster right underneath an overhang, which is underneath a garage by the building. So fire started in the dumpster, communicated up the side of the building, broke the glass, got inside the building on 2 floors, completely traveled almost the height of the building because of the EFIS. So you look at this as a fireproof building, and you say to yourself, how could this fire start from the outside? The critical problem you have here, you have elderly people with a heavy smoke condition. It's not like you're dealing with ambulatory people now. But I was just amazed how much this fire traveled up the side of the building. The other interesting thing is, after the fire is over, 3 months from now, guess where they put the dumpster? Back where it was before. So we're in a cycle. Like, common sense is not common, but you try to get the message out when you're doing fire prevention lectures, for public. You got to change our tactics today. We ever talk about what you have in your home today, the fuel loading? I used to go out on water leaks, gas leaks. I used to turn to the guys. I go, how much gasoline do you think is in this apartment? How many gallons? By looking at the furnishings. That's our problem today. That's why the fire atmosphere today is becoming so critical, because we're dealing with a high concentration of fuel that's super rich. And that's what a statement I made about venting for life. That's why. You vent for life, you're just igniting the whole apartment up. That's the end of it. The only thing we have in our control is ventilation. Keep that fire confined and keep it suffocated. When I came on the job, interesting, we used to get a lot of hotel one-room fires. And what the senior guys used to do, they would go in and close the door after them. Okay, why? Keep this thing suffocated. It's a mattress, foam rubber mattress. We'll put it out with the can. But the minute you leave that door open, you're letting oxygen in, the room's going to light up. So there's a lot of things I learned over the years, and sometimes it's hard to convince people that this is what you have to do, and we just have to look at tactics, adjust tactics with the modern construction, and also with the high fuel contact that we have exposing apartments today that run through the average home today.
Joe, we had a brother weigh in on the amount of fuel loading on a porch. And could you comment on the amount of stored energy that is in patio furniture, the faux rattan, the polyurethane seat cushions, the polyvinyl chloride, and what happens when they burn on a patio or a back deck?
Well, the thing, what's interesting, you said that. If you look at the average home today, we create our own environment. We have that wooden deck around the house. We have that polyurethane, polyethylene foam sofa, the pillows that are part of it. Dan Aronofsky from UL made an interesting statement once. The super sofa fire in Charleston, we all know about that. If you look at the sofas, they're all polyethylene foam. And if you look under the cushion, there's a little tag. And I found this interesting because I used to look at it all the time. You had to search for the tag. And the outside of the tag was like gold and black. When you open it up, it's all red. It says, keep away from open flame. Polyethylene base to it. But he said there was enough fuel in that store and that building to fuel a 737. So if you look at that, that's a large area, 737, but look at the average household. You're in a small confined room, 8.5 by 11, or a deck, a wooden deck that has that same polyethylene foam on it. That cushion gets going. It's generating tremendous amount of heat, tremendous amount of energy, communicates to the wooden deck. Before you know it, you have yourself a raging fire as if you took a gallon of gasoline and poured it on the deck. And that's the reality of what you're faced with today. The other thing I wanted to bring forth is one of the most second causes of these outside-in fires is charcoal grills or barbecue grills. Now, the fire you mentioned in Chicago, I was looking at that, and I'm just summarizing. It was an auto-exposed fire from the first floor up on the decks. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you are, Joe. I spoke to the chief of Calumet City, Glenn Batchert, and it was on the second floor. It was a barbecue grill on the second floor. All of the exterior porches had wood on them. Wood, the soffits on the underside of the porch were wood. There were concrete balconies coming out on the building, but they all had wood on them. All the dividers between the units were wood. It was all wood on it. Pete, do you have that video? The chief sent me a video of pre-arrival taken by one of the civilians. And this is a typical building in like I used to have in Brooklyn, where it's 7 stories. What we see in the rear is 6 stories.
My God. Wow.
Okay. And if you can play that, Pete. Okay. This
Wow.
is before they even got there. And they're all up, and there's a parking garage there. So what happens is they can't get the trucks in there because the parking garage will not support the weight of the vehicles. So, I mean, the fire, they were on scene in less than 5 minutes.
Wow.
Okay. But they couldn't even get water high enough to get it. They ended up calling Chicago, Jimmy, for your pickup truck with a pumper with the deluge gun mounted on the pickup truck to get it in there because of the weight of the parking garage. So it's amazing how much fire. And I mean, he also sent me other pictures, 12-inch steel I-beams on the top floor, deformed.
Wow.
Because of the amount of heat. They did lose a 75-year-old woman on the top floor of this fire. But it was unbelievable how much fire they had pre-arrival on this outside in. And it's all of the stuff on the porches, as we just talked about, the cushions. And it just started as one, somebody thought they turned the grill off, didn't turn the grill off, left one of the burners on, got hot. Whether it was a cover or what, they don't know yet, but something around the grill, but it was a cooking fire.
Peter,
Okay.
could you show that video of the barbecue grill fire on the balcony? It only takes about 5 seconds. It's the one I sent you this morning.
Stand by, Bill. Just get it
Okay.
up.
Captain Mike, I have a feeling, I'm very confident, and I wasn't even there, that this is just a taste of one 20-pound cylinder, just one. Okay, start that over again and we can watch it. Okay, here we go.
Wow.
All right. Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Yep. Bill, I don't know if the 20-pound cylinder let go, they were going to look into that. Don't know that yet, but because of the wood on that fire, the wooden balconies, the wooden dividers, it fueled the fire. It was amazing. And again, the no access in the rear and the fuel loading in there. Plus, in this fire that they just had in Chicago, they had 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So it was a wind-driven fire. And it was, of course, Murphy's Law blowing into the building on this fire. So it took everything into the building on this fire for them.
That was the question I was going to ask you, Mike. It was wind driven. And what time of day was that or night?
The first call the fire department got was 1901 hours.
So 7
Okay.
o'clock. Yeah.
And yeah, and they didn't have it fully under control on the top floor because of problems getting up there. And I mean, again, not that many Manning. Calumet City had 12, Lansing had 2, Dalton had 3, South Howland had 4. That's the initial alarm assignment on this. So you're talking about 7 floors of fire, people missing and everything else, and rescues to be made. And you have 15, you have 21 people showing up on the first alarm assignment. So again, you know, it's just the way it is. But the other thing that amazed me at this fire, these guys went through on average 4 bottles each. I have never in my career gone through more than 2. Okay, 4 bottles each on average. That's how much work these guys had to do to get that fire under control.
Well,
How much did it extend in the exterior? Every apartment?
The apartments in that line, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see this, if I can get this. That's the steel I-beam. That's the 12-inch I-beam.
Wow.
Okay, and the chief sent this to me, and let's see if I can get the other one. That's how much it extended in the building.
That's amazing.
We've got great photographs of this, and I'm going to plug my 2 buddies, Mike Dugan and Tim Olk. Mike is going to be writing a analysis on this fire. It's called Fire Focus. It's one of our the most well-read segments of fire engineering, and it's going to include some of these pictures from the fire chief, and also from our buddy Tim Olk, who is an amazing Chicago area fire photographer who looks at fires and looks through the lens of his camera with the eyes of a fireman. So his pictures are not always these spectacular photos of flame, but they're the kind of pictures you can use in classes on building construction and fire dynamics. So I wanted to give a shout out to our buddy Tim, and also for being there on the scene. But Tim, I've got to ask a question. I know you can't answer, but I got 2 questions for you, Tim. Why do you seem to get there so quickly at these fires? And my second question is, why do your clothes always smell like gasoline, Tim? Would you be able to explain that to us, Tim?
Really,
hey, I'm going to give a shout out to our friends at Key Hose. That's keyhose.com. Yeah, I can't say enough about it. I'm going to give you the key challenge. Try any of their brands of hose, including the FDNY spec, which is extremely robust. It's actually a more robust version, I think, of as the Combat Ready. I think so. And their True ID hose, 2.5, 2 1/4, is amazing stuff. And right now, as I said, it's being dragged across the pavement right now at our training facility. We had talked about EFIS, and Clark has some amazing pictures of a great stop in a, well, I'll let Clark explain it.
All right. What do we got? Yep, perfect. Peter, can you bring the picture of the whole building up, please? From the front view. Yeah, there we go. So this is an assisted living facility in Las Vegas. You can see it's huge. It is a new building, just a couple of years old. So it's built to the most current building codes and fire codes. It is very high end. It's $5,000 to $6,000 a month to live here. It's all assisted living. So you know what that means. A lot of ambulatory, partially ambulatory people. Lightweight construction, concrete tile roof, and it is completely covered in EFIS. And this is going to sound a lot like what Joe Barry was talking about. So we get that next picture, please, Peter.
Which one?
The one you just had with the wall, the burned up wall. So yeah, so this is the Charlie side of the building. And that portion of the building is the kitchen. Outside that kitchen door, they had one of those heavy plastic laundry bins on wheels, and they had all their kitchen rags from the greasy kitchen rags, and they had it set right against that building. Left it in the Las Vegas summer sun for a few hours, and it ignited and completely burned up the rags. And those plastic laundry bins, they have a phenomenal amount of energy in them.
Oh, yeah,
So-
man.
Right. And so that's burning, and it's right against that ephes wall. And for those of you who don't know what an ephes wall is, you can see the studs on there, the studs, and then they glue polystyrene or styrofoam right to the wall, and they cover it with a mesh and then put a very thin layer, 16-inch of stucco on top of it. And they can get away with it because per code, the flammable polystyrene must be encapsulated in some kind of fireproof material. So by code, this was acceptable because it was behind stucco. Well, that energy of that fire burned completely through that stucco, got behind that stucco, and completely torched all that polystyrene and transferred over to that other wall on the right side of that building. You can see clearly where that stucco is just troweled on, where the ephes is, the foam is just troweled on and stuck to the side of that building. So,
Clark, you mean
Yes,
to
sir.
tell me there's no OSB, there's no plywood, that the exterior sheathing is rigid polystyrene foam?
absolutely, yes. In Las Vegas,
Wow.
because our building codes are our weather is so mild that I always say a house in Las Vegas, brand new house in Las Vegas, would last about 9 months in Chicago. It would be on the ground in 9 months, but our weather is so mild. We don't have snow, anything like that. So they get away with it. So if you're ever going to break into a house in Las Vegas, don't go to the door, kick a hole right through the wall. You can put your boot right through the wall and
Right
crawl
through the
between the
wall.
stud space, and you're in the
Wow.
house. Right.
Hey,
So-
Pete, I've done so much research on ephes. I worked on that for probably at least another 7-8 years from different fires. But what I noticed about it over the years, it has a shelf life. I took some pictures up in Wappingers Falls, a commercial building where the cracking of the ephes is taking place. Whether it was put up properly or not, I don't know. But I went inside and I asked one of the real estate people there. She says, "Oh, we have a severe mold problem now." But that ephes, I'll tell you, it's just a temporary fix. I never knew you were allowed to put them on studs like you explained to me just now, because most of the time it had to be on a sheathing or a block wall. The nursing home I referred to in Coney Island, that was on a block wall. And it's an interesting thing I'll tell you about that fire. The chief coming over the bridge, the 8th Division comes from Staten Island. It's a good ways. He could see the heavy plume from Verrazano Bridge, probably about 6 miles away from that fire. So that stuff is nasty, you know?
Have any of you ever seen the video that Joe Schwarto for Fireline Videos talking
Yep.
to Harvey Eisner's a partner of the ephes on the soffit of the strip mall, where they had a fire in a diner and it came out and it exposed the ephes, and all of a sudden when it hit its ignition point, it ran the entire underside of the soffit, all the sides. If you look on Fireline Video, I think you can still find it. But the ephes foam, it was an unbelievable fire. I know we used it in the FDNY for training for annual education day for a couple of years. Really amazing, because underneath the soffit is similar to Las Vegas and New York City. They don't have to have any plywood or anything there because it's just in the exposed space. It's not exposed to any weights or anything else. So it's just the foam. It was just the foam on this one.
Mike, what made that travel, it's interesting. Bradley Walls had the fire.
Right.
The fact that it was an overhang soffit, all the heat and convection was built up under there like a heat sink. So once it got going, it had tremendous amount of heat. It just took off. So, you've seen the video, so have I. It took off so fast, like you poured gasoline on. It was like napalm. But once they hit it, surface hit it with the line, they knocked it down pretty quick. But I was amazed just as much as you were how fast that thing took off.
Yep.
And also how much energy is released. How much energy. So the other part of this story is, so the cops were the first on scene because the cops saw the header. They rush in. And like I said, this building is a new building built to the strictest fire and building codes I'm in this building regularly on medical calls, as you do on an assisted living facility in your first in. Every single person was completely safe in their room. Every person was completely safe in your room, except for there's a little bit of smoke right above in that vent. We had smoke enter that vent, and we had light smoke on the second floor, third floor of the hallway. So the police showed up and go running down the hall and start banging on doors, screaming everyone to evacuate the building, evacuate the building, evacuate the building. So when we showed up, first engine company obviously hits exterior. We sent companies inside to check for extension, and they were met with elderly people who are partially ambulatory. A lot of them had forgot were so excited to leave the building. They left their eyeglasses behind. They left their hearing aids behind. Some of them left their shoes behind. One woman had a cat, a small cat, carrying it in a headlock, and she was without her glasses or hearing aids. She was blind and deaf, and she was stumbling through a completely clear hallway trying to get out. She didn't even know where she was going. And this is what the fire companies were facing. Fortunately, there was no fire extension, just a little bit of smoke. But I can't imagine what would happen if we would have had fire in that hallway and we would have had engine companies stretching hose down that hallway with all these partially ambulatory elderly people who were going nowhere. This building does have vestibules in the stairwells, but whether these people could find the stairwells, I doubt it. Whether these people would even know enough to go into the vestibule and stay and wait, I doubt it. No one's using the elevators, obviously, because the fire alarms went off and the elevators recalled. So we had a serious problem, and we need to have a conversation with the police on how they're supposed to act on these type of fires.
Hey, Clark, can I
Yes,
ask you a
sir.
question?
Yes, sir.
What time of day was this fire?
Daytime, afternoon.
How much in an assisted living, what's the staffing levels? I would figure the staff would be doing a lot here, or did they just bail also?
No, staff did not bail. But they have a fire alarm announcement, a pre-recorded fire alarm announcement that says there is a fire in the building. Everyone needs to evacuate. Yep, everyone needs to evacuate. And I have since tried. I went down the rabbit hole of getting that changed. And it sounds like that the owner of this building said we need it in writing from the fire department that says you're allowed to change that message. And the fire department prevention bureau said, we are not willing to put that in writing. We are not willing to tell people to shelter in place in their apartments. Because if something happens, obviously, like we have a Grenfell Tower or something, if the fire department says we order you to shelter in place and someone gets hurt, well, then where's the liability lie?
Hey, Pete, it's interesting you mentioned you're in Vegas, the Monte Carlo fire. I had spoke to someone about that fire. It was up on the cornice, the top of the Monte Carlo hotel.
Yes, sir.
And that was Ephes, of course, too. But I was talking to the chief, and he said, I asked him how they put it out, and this is what he told me. He said they lowered a fireman on a tethered rope with 1 inch and 3/4. And I go, it's a surface burning fire. But I said, well, you have to do what tactic works. I mean, I was amazed how much fire was on the exterior of that building.
Yeah.
You know?
And that was a hell of a stop for us, Joe. That was a hell of a stop for us. We actually didn't lower anyone off the edge of the building. But what they did do, they had firefighters. So the fire auto exposed through the window and was burning inside the front half of the suites. The second half was protected by a sprinkler. And if you see the pictures, you can clearly see the line of demarcation where the sprinkler was hitting the wall. Half the suite was completely destroyed, and the other half just had smoke damage because of the sprinkler. So the companies, Joe, would go in, force the door, fight fire with a 2.5 on a smoothbore, fight fire all the way to the window, and then one firefighter would hold the other guy's air pack, and he would lean out of the window on the 32nd floor with a 2.5 between his legs, and he's fighting fire up and over his head as he's being held on 32 floors up. And I've got some pictures of that.
It's funny because he sent me pictures and exactly what you're saying. You can see the difference where it came in. They held it back from the sprinklers, but that's what he said to me. He goes, we just tethered a guy in a rope. We put it out from the exterior. I said, wow, that's something that's kind of hairy, you know. But unbelievable fire. And of course, what they tell you with the Ephes, the main cause is they keep away from a high heat source. Apparently they were using torches up on the roof or something, right?
Yeah, they were building a walkway. They were welding a bridge, a small bridge, and the slag from the welder dropped right through the stucco and capture that styrofoam and started burning they hit it with like 7 fire extinguishers. They were working, they had fire extinguishers there, but the fire was burning underneath the stucco. So they were hitting it with fire extinguishers, didn't even touch it because the fire was burning behind the stucco.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah. And actually, Joe, that fire was extinguished. The way they got it was they took one of those rapid attack monitors, or the what do we call them? You know what I mean? They're all different.
Yeah.
Portable master stream.
Portable
device.
master streams. They put it in one side. They put it on one side of the building, and the building had a Y shape to it on one wing out of the window. And they put that on the ledge and had 2 firefighters lay on top of it to keep it on there. And they shot that stream all the way across the other side of the face of that building. And that's actually how they extinguished it.
And for you guys, when you guys have a job like that, I remember watching that on TV. That was live on TV, and I was like, "Holy cow!" So not only were you doing your impersonation of Circus Soleil, hanging out the windows with 2.5 million, the whole world's watching.
The whole and the incident commander, reported that his personal cell phone rings, and it was news media from Singapore. And they the fire is burned. He's actively in command of this fire, and Singapore is calling on his personal cell phone. He has no idea how they got that number, but real time. Hey, what's going on? Can you give us an update in Singapore?
I don't know if you remember, there was a fire in Mississippi. It was a barge. It was a casino. And I called the chief about that one. It started in the bird's nest. They had a bird's nest and a light fixture. So people just passing by. No one took the bird's nest out. So eventually the bird's nest caught fire, exposed to the ethos. And I think the barge is fully engulfed. But it was interesting because, you would think of something like a harmless bird's nest on top of a light fixture. But then again, you realize this is ethos, So anyway.
Now, Clark, on the Monte Carlo, on a lot of these ethos systems, depending on what it is, they leave a little airspace in the back to avoid mold, because they don't want the moisture sitting in there. And that airspace, because it's standing up straight behind it, it allows the air. So now the fire gets going, and it's got an automatic flue going up. That's also the thing that happens frequently with the cladding, the burnable cladding that we have.
Yes.
The same thing happens. It's the airspace. Once the fire gets in there, it gets up and it starts burning this stuff all the way up. And it's amazing. But they do that because the buildings were getting so sick, because we were putting all this stuff together, and then we were getting the mold in there, and they were having huge problems with the mold. And someone was just talking about the building that had the mold problem, where the woman said, "Oh, we have a mold problem with this, it not being installed correctly, Joe." And a lot of times that mold problem is because it's not installed. There's supposed to be an air gap in there, but that air gap is not our friend.
True. And in Las Vegas buildings, Captain Dugan, we don't have that air gap because we have a very, very dry environment. So they just simply trowel mud. They trowel glue right onto the that concrete tilt up. They trowel glue on there, and they stick that 1-inch foam board, stick it right on the side of that building, and then cover it with stucco.
But in your buildings, because they put it on the exterior of the building, it's the foam. There is an air gap on the backside of the foam in between the studs, correct?
Yes. Yep.
So you do have the air feeding it. It's just a little different than mine would be on the block or something else.
Yep.
Hey, Peter, those metal studs or wood studs?
Those are wood.
They're wood.
Yep.
Okay.
Those are wood studs.
That's
And those
unbelievable.
fire doors held. They didn't have any extension into the kitchen because that fire door held.
That's amazing.
Clark, that almost looks like old terracotta brick.
Right?
It can't possibly be, but
No, that's just the color. That might be just the color. I don't know what that color is for.
that reddish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like you can see where they put it on with a trowel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might just be from the trowel.
It
Yeah.
might be the foam. That might be the foam itself, Bill, that hasn't caught fire. It looks like the sheathing, the fiberglass netting that they put the mud on.
Yeah.
What's off there with the mud, and that might be the ethos itself with that color.
Now, as I look at that picture, there might be OSB backing on that. That picture on the left looks like we might have OSB backing on that wall,
On
which
that
is
wall.
which is unusual. Usually, like I said, they just put it right on. I know in residential, they're allowed to use the foam right on the studs, and that's because they have the polymer modified stucco that actually flexes with the building, so it reduces cracking. So instead of just your traditional cement-based stucco, they put polymers in it and allows it to be more flexible. That's how they get away with putting just foam on those walls, because as that wall moves, the stucco will move too and it won't crack. But maybe it's different on this building. I am seeing OSB sheathing on those studs.
Hey, Peter, question for you. In New York, there is a maintenance error. They say every 7 years, you have to check that. Okay, you have to check the EIFS. Do they have the same in Vegas where it has to be checked every 5 or 10 years, whatever it is, to make sure
No.
it's still, no?
Joe, I've never heard of that. I've never
Yeah,
heard
well-
of that. And with the amount of buildings we have and the size of our fire prevention bureau, I would be extremely surprised if that ever happened.
Yeah, well, they have to do it here. But matter of fact, the manufacturer of EIFS in New York recommend that it's checked every 5 to 7 years for cracking.
Okay.
So, because what happens today, you have a contractor who does the EIFS. There's a procedure you have to install it. It has to be done a certain way. I've seen it where it's not even being done that way. They crush the EIFS when they put these their rings on these nails. It's just supposed to hit home and stop, and they crush it. So automatically you deform the EIFS. So the installation of this is very critical. If you don't have a company that is putting the right method of installing it, you're gonna have a problem.
Well, it sounds like you have a problem either way.
Well, you do, no matter what. But I'm just saying, the installation is not done by Eastern European Viking shipbuilders today. You know.
And I'd
Clark, I
say
have a question. Captain Clark.
residential. Go ahead with the question.
Oh, sorry about that. I noticed the absence of overhangs. Is that something common in Nevada where they're not doing soffits or overhangs? Just imagine this would have been a totally different story if it had a 12-inch or 6-inch overhang getting into that flat roof. And what was that portion of the building, the flat roof? Kitchen area or?
Yeah, that was the kitchen. Yep, that was the kitchen. And that is just an architectural feature right there, Jimmy. We do have soffits. We do have overhang in a lot of buildings. That's just what that builder decided to do. So
Even
just
with the EIFS.
Yep. And those soffits and overhangs are just like we talked about. They are just polystyrene foam underneath them as well. Polystyrene foam underneath.
Thanks, Captain.
Yep.
You said the roof is clay roof, right? Clay shingle roof.
Concrete tiles. Yeah, those concrete tiles. But the flat roof was not. Flat roof was just that. Again, the flat roofs are polystyrene roofs, and they're covered by that TPO, that thermoplastic olefin.
Thermoplastic.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's it. It is foam. And we've had a lot of foam. We had a near miss. I'll share it with you guys later. We had a very significant near miss on a commercial, a giant Kmart that they're turning into a church. And they were tack welding from underneath the metal trusses on the Q deck, and it heated up the foam and started burning. And they had a wind coming towards them. The ladder company laddered the roof. They took one look at it. They said, "Oh, it's 100 square feet of fire. Let's connect the hose." By the time they got the hose connected, and it was probably 200 feet away from them when they entered the roof, they had their backs turned. They connected the hoses. By the time they turned around, the fire was on top of them. And I have some helmet cam from the fireman that was on that roof, and we damn near lost a whole truck company that day. It moved that quickly, and it was a forest fire. It was a forest. It moves like a forest fire, and they entered downwind and standing on highly flammable materials. So it was unbelievable.
Those are truss roofs that are on that place, right? Referring to the senior citizen living.
Yeah, it's a truss roof. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
There's an attic space, but the attic space is sprinkled. Wood trusses with a sprinkled attic space. Yes.
Yeah, that's a biggie. Florida, that's mandatory. Yeah. I was amazed how many of these truss lofts are fully sprinkled. But it's the weather too, because you don't have to worry about freezing. Pipes freezing. I guess It's all PVC piping up there anyway, right? For the sprinkler.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It is dry system though. We do, believe it or not, we do freeze. We do freeze in Las Vegas. So it has to be a dry system in the attic.
Dry system in the attic. Yeah.
Is it an automatic dry system or do you have to supply it?
Automatic. It is, yeah, it is an
Yeah.
automatic dry system.
Yes. Yep, okay.
So when hell freezes over, you're still protected.
And when hell freezes over, yes. Yeah, we are. Hey, we don't realize we're 2,000 feet. We're a high desert. We're at 2,000 feet. So every year we do freeze in Vegas for a couple days.
2,000 feet, come on.
Yeah, Vegas is 2,000 feet.
We used to, no, I used to live at I was at 7,000 feet in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
We were up in the mountains. Yeah, we were at 7,000. That's where you really suck air there, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's talk to this Flatlander for a minute here, this Hovelman. Let's say, hey, what elevation are you there, Chief Hovelman?
We're between 600 and 700, depending on which way you drive.
Now, you've welcomed me as an instructor many times. I've been in your area, and also teaching for the Muddy River Fools. I'll give a good shout out to them. But we looked at some. You have a wide variety of exterior sheathing and a lot of. And this is not combustible, but it is very prone to collapse. You took me to a building where the brick facade was coming off. It was concrete block, but all you had were these little galvanized tabs that embedded in the concrete block to hold on the red, supposed to be looking like red Chicago brick, but there's no stability to it whatsoever. You remember when we looked at that?
Yeah,
We could have taken the thing apart with our hands.
Yeah, it just falls off. Especially, it depends on the maintenance of the building. It's mostly those are older buildings, believe it or not, a lot of them. But you wouldn't know that they're not real brick. They just have these little metal tabs, and they are supposed to tie into the exterior facade. And over the years, if the building's not maintained or if the gutters aren't maintained, they get beat up by the weather, the frost and freeze, which we get more than a couple days of here, as opposed to Clark out there in Vegas. But it's routine to see those things falling apart, and they are a potential collapse hazard. And they also, what they do, Bill, is allows what we've seen too is water to penetrate the actual structure and corrode the commercial side, the metal and masonry, and on the residential side. Apartment buildings, as an example, the sill plates and things like that.
Jason, Chief, I think it was the words of Francis Brannigan that talked about brick veneer. And he says, the fact that the building doesn't collapse itself is no consolation to the poor firemen that are buried in a ton of brick facade.
Yeah, and it's not always over a fire. You talk about these multifamily buildings and exterior problems. Columbia, a handful of years ago, had an incident that it was a concrete second floor exterior walkway around exterior access of this apartment building, and they had a firefighter underneath, and that concrete was so degraded it collapsed and killed him. And so it's not even always under fire conditions necessarily, but the lack of maintenance, the age, those things can be extreme hazards for us if we're not paying attention.
Yeah, we know a little thing or two about deteriorating concrete, but that'll be for another day. Jimmy.
Hey, Captain Gustin, real quick, off topic.
Yes,
can I throw a shout out to Chief Hovelman?
Yes.
All right. So when the probationary firefighters get out of school, they have a task book. I'm sure we all do the same thing, right? So every month you have to accomplish these several tasks, and you do a captain or senior fireman has to sign it off. So one of the tasks was practice a lunar with a captain. So you have to practice your lunar report. And so I have this firefighter just a couple days ago, this young firefighter comes in Las Vegas, and he says, "Hey, Cap, this is my task book. Can I practice my lunar? But you know what? I've been doing some research, and I hear that the lunar is kind of on its way out." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He says, "I read this great article and I want to share it with you." And the name of the article was Alternative to Lunar for a May Day. And he's reading me this article. I says, that sounds like it makes sense. And I look at it, and it's written by Chief Hovelman. And how many years ago was that, Chief?
I'm going to guess 6 or 7, maybe.
6 or 7 years ago. So I just want to tell you and everyone listening that Chief Holverman is actively protecting and saving lives of Clark County firefighters in Las Vegas. So thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Jimmy, we're going to be wrapping it up here pretty soon. You've been catching any work at Fighting 43, Jimmy?
Not of anything significant, Cap. Nothing significant. I had a hoarder house fire a week ago, and that was my last fire, the hoarder house. Fire on one, extended up the plumbing wall, tagged the attic. Good fire, all hands working on that one. But I wish I had more stories, but stay tuned.
I got one more story, and it has to do with the pouring the beer on the fire, which I think Joe told. No. This is, before I got on my hometown department in Wheaton, Illinois, they had a fire in the neighboring suburb of Winfield. The folks, it was around the holidays. They had a party, and a cigarette found its way in between the seat cushions. Now, they had the presence of mind to pour water on it and to take it outside because they were worried about it rekindling, and for good reason. I got to give them credit. But the fatal mistake is they put it right up against the back wall underneath the soffit. I think it was a 2-story house. Well, that fire burnt right up the vinyl siding and got up into the attic, and it ended up being a fatality. So we've got a long way. We could continue with these discussions about these outside in fires. And by next month, we'll probably have some other news-making fires because they do seem to be a trend. And I think that Joe is right. People smoking weed is going to increase, and also people are so anti-smoking that the smoker in the family has been relegated to the outside balcony, and we're seeing more of that. And then, of course, there's a whole nother story when Thanksgiving comes around, and you guys that like the juice harp and the banjo, those, you're air frying your turkeys. But that's for another day. So, Joe, can
I just add one thing I wanted to mention before?
Yeah, man.
With the influx of electric vehicles today, that's something also we have to. There was a couple of good car fires that communicated to the house because the houses are 15 feet apart and they park in a common driveway. But now we have an issue with electric cars, and somebody's going to have an electric car. They're going to plug it inside their home, or they're going to put it adjacent to the home. So that's another thing we have to consider in the fire service with these electric cars today. Just a point.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. It's everything's under control. We've got these windmills that are making these electricity. And remember, green and sustainable isn't always a firefighter's friend. And I'll leave it at that. Hey, Joe, thank you so much. When we go off air, I want to get your address and send you a challenge coin. But man, this has really been great. Would you come back another time?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I have tons of this stuff for 15, 16 years. So I just put a dent in 3 different type of occupancies that are prevalent in America. But I can
Joe,
go on and go on.
Joe, if you could do us a favor, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
I know a lot of guys out there would love to, speak to you, hear you present, talk about the outside in fires. As I said on our last outside in broadcast, there's nobody in the business that's done more homework on this or paid closer attention or has written as eloquently and insightfully as you have on these. And I know many people would love to hear directly from the source, because there's no better way to learn than from the man who spent the time. And as we started the presentation today, it was just impressive. The first point, I could have listened to you for the next 2 hours because you have so much to tell. And would you mind giving an email or something that if folks want to contact you directly?
Sure, I give it right over to you now if you want.
Sure, yeah, we appreciate it.
It's JOBER 73 at optonline.net. Joba73 at optonline.net.
Thank you.
And I'd be more than glad to send people material I have. It's for nothing. It's strictly my motivation. Like I said before, is safety of firefighters. That's what I do as a hobby, and I love it. I'm in this till the day I check out of Earth.
And one last favor, I got this really needy friend who runs this small fire conference every year in Indianapolis.
Sure.
And he would really appreciate it if you'd go to fdic.com. I'll send you the link and put in to do outside in fires at this small intimate conference where people would love to hear from you. And if you want to do 4 hours, or if you want to do an hour 45 and 4 hours, there's nobody who's got a greater handle on this than you. We'd love to have you with us.
Bobby, I'm really honored to be here, and I thank you for thinking of me. As I get older and older, my voice gets weary and weary, so I'm very cognizant of that. So that's why I wasn't doing lectures anymore, constantly clearing my throat. But I felt, well, I have good material, so maybe that'll compensate for somebody looking at me clearing my throat all the time. But anyway, I really appreciate it. I'm honored to be here. I really am.
Well, your wisdom, your experience, your just everything about you is inspiring, and so I know that I know it'd be a sold out class. So
I'd be there, Joe.
I'd be there.
For sure.
I'd sit there. I could sit all day. So I'm going to send you the link, and if you don't fill it out, I know where you live. So I'll come pick you up in April and drive you there myself if I have to.
Chief Hall, remind everyone of the deadline for submittals.
June 17th, go to fdic.com, go to, you'll see conference, click on conference. The first tab is call for presentation. Put in your workshop, your class, your hands-on. Of course, we'd love to have Joe, everybody on this call will be teaching. So, we'd love to have you join us. We're a tactics training conference. So it's what's the problem? What do you think we could do to fix it? And you got to be willing to give it away. You got to be able to impart knowledge to your fellow firefighters that they can go and use the next day. Maybe not all of it, maybe a piece of it here, a piece of it there. Stuff that Clark does, obviously, with his temperatures is going to be different than Jimmy's guys when they have to, in the middle of the winter when it's below zero. So we would absolutely encourage everybody to please get your stuff in now. We will be doing the selection in August, so you'd be hearing probably late August about whether or not your class got picked up. We'd love to have you in there. And if you don't get picked up, we can give you good feedback as to why. And maybe you just need to write about it or let us know who you are, or maybe you didn't do the proposal correctly. And everybody on this call looks at proposals. So we look at hundreds of them. I look at roughly 1,200 a year. And I know everybody on this call looks at them for us. So they're all reviewers for us. We'd love to have you come. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know that much. If you're on the job, and I don't care if you're on the job 6 months, something well enough to present it to everybody else, because it might be really local to your gig, and maybe you could pick up on it. Look at what just happened with Jason's article from 6 years ago, that a young man picks up in Clark County and brings it, brings it of all people to Clark and says, "Hey, where'd you get this from?" "Oh, a guy named Jason Holman." You got to be kidding me, right? So we're a big job, but a small family, and the best way to find out if you really know what you're talking about is to teach it, and it's a lot of fun. And you don't have to have, you don't have to be Joe Berry or John Norman or Bill Gustin or Leo Stapleton or Mike Dugan. You could be just a regular guy like me and Jason, and you still get out there and we teach, and you have a great time, and it's a lot of fun. And it could be everything from, how to be a good probie to how to be a downtown, hardcore, ladder company officer like Mike Dugan. I mean, it could be anything and everything in between. And also on the EMS side, if you're a great paramedic out there and you want to talk about some really good stuff, a good portion, 30% of our show is, EMS based stuff, and so please get it in there. Hands-on also. We got some really cool new proposals coming in from some young guys, and some really cool new proposals coming in from some old guys. So we're going to dramatically be expanding our hands-on training, which is hard to believe because we had 27 hands-on training classes last year, so it'll be even bigger. So please, FDIC.com, click on conference, first tab down, call for presentations.
And don't forget keyhose.com. They're our good friends. It's not just the product, it's the customer service. You can pick up a phone and talk to somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about. And they're true gentlemen. I work personally with Mark Lighthill, National Sales Manager, and Dave Hibben, and true gentlemen. And they're wholesalers. They're not out to sell you any hose. They're just there to stand behind their product. And it's an excellent product. Well, fellas, again, Joe, thank you so much. When we
Thank you.
get offline here, I need to get your address. Okay, brother? Jimmy, God bless.
Thank you,
Chief
Ted.
Halton,
Thank you, Joe.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Steve Hovelman, Clark, brother.
Take
All
care,
right,
everybody.
everybody. Till next month. God bless. Stay safe.
Bye.